Okay, this is Friday, the 3rd of May. My last video I said it was the 4th of May. It's the 3rd of May. Now, the purpose for this video is a letter that I wrote to an engineer and sent to him in February 11th of 2021. This is before I started getting letters from my yard. I feel maybe this letter that I sent to this was a town engineer. I'll tell you how I got his name. He called me, and that's how I got his name and his email address. His name is Paul Lopez. The reason he called me was a follow-up on when I was paying my bills for, the bills weren't going through in time because the utility here in Buckeye sends their checks to Salt Lake City to be processed. During COVID, there was a lag, and I got extra billed, or I got penalized. I got notified that my check that I sent in on time was late, okay, and it showed up on the next bill. I didn't like it, okay, and when I called up the city of Buckeye to find out why I had this charge after I'd sent the check in, they said, well, we don't process it anymore. We farm it out to outfit in Salt Lake City, and because of COVID and the mail and everything messed up, we didn't get it paid on time. So that's why you're like in arrears or penalized or being notified. So to stop that from ever happening again, and she suggested you can go downtown Buckeye around Monroe, or you can go out on Yuma Road out there past Rainbow. I forget on the way to Jackrabbit, or not Jackrabbit, but forget the name. It's Verado. So on the way between Rainbow and Verado way, the police department there and the record keeping there. I went to pay. She goes, you can pay your bill there from now on. And to keep from being late for the last 2 years, this letter was sent in February 11th. So it's been 3 years, over 3 years, and ever since, and for over 3 years, I drive to where the police station is there on Yuma to pay. And the utilities, that's like a second town office up here near Sundance. I go in every month and I pay my bill. So I was in there and I got in a dialogue with a manager there or something like that. And what happened was she goes, have you got any complaints or anything that is bothering you, or your concerns about your account? And I go, yeah, I have a concern about my account. My house was built wrong. The sewer pipes in my house do not meet the spec for the blueprints of my neighborhood. They lowered my finished floor elevation, and being a person of science and physical science, I know that they reduced the flow rate. My sewer pipes are out of compliance. I have the proof. I have the blueprints for the neighborhood. I also have my individual signed stamp permit from the town of Buckeye, and they don't agree. And they don't agree by 2.5 inches. And I sort of made this statement to her that I feel I'm getting ripped off by the town of Buckeye. I didn't get what I paid for. Okay? The town of Buckeye was responsible for giving me a finished floor elevation that matched the blueprint, and it didn't happen. The builder, which was Meritage Hancock, same people, somebody in the builder went into the computer and they tampered with the finished floor elevation for the blueprint that they took in to be authorized and stamped for the finished floor elevation didn't agree. Somehow the computer spit it out and it didn't agree with the blueprint for the neighborhood. Now I've known this for about 8 or 9 years. And she gave me the opening and said, "You got any complaints?" And yeah, I feel like I'm getting ripped off by the town of Buckeye. I didn't get what I was paying for. All right? I feel operationally, I have to be very careful how I use my drains. I don't use my garbage disposal. I don't use the dishwasher. I don't throw parties. Thank God I have a solitary life. I'm only using maybe 3,000 gallons a month. It's an operational issue for my house. I didn't get what I paid for because a bureaucrat downtown and somebody who represented the builder brought in the blueprint for my lot, and they lowered the finished floor elevation on purpose, intentionally, by 2.5 inches. Not only did they do that, but during that period of time, Tract A, our open water channel for any backup of the drain, was filled in. There's a letter to prove it. Woody Scouten wrote a letter in about February of 2012 condemning Tract A as being filled in, that it didn't drain. It's a city letter on city letterhead. Okay? Well, anyway, this whoever the manager was when I talked to her made a report, and I got a call from this fella here, Paul Lopez. And when he called me, he says, "I hear that you have concerns about your bill and concerns about the service that you're getting." I said, "Yeah, I am. I do have concerns. I want to know how Paul Lopez, Thursday, this was February 11th, 2021. He had called me. When he called me, we had a conversation, and I had been dealing with this now for, this was 21. I moved into the house in 5, for 6 years, 16 years. Everything I talk about falls on deaf ears. And the last 2 times that I visited downtown Buckeye on Monroe and went to the 2nd floor, you can't get by the receptionist until you give them your name. And both times when I gave them my name, nobody was there to talk to me. The receptionists come back, nobody's here. The second time, I was a little more persistent. She goes, "Nobody's here to talk to you right now." I said, "Good, I'll wait over here in the lobby area." And that's what I did. I waited over in the lobby area, and the girl came out and asked me for my cell phone number. And when I gave it to her, I was immediately phoned by an engineer that says, "If you don't leave now, we're going to call the police and have you removed from the building. You're making a scene." No, I'm not. You all know who I am, and you all know what my concerns are. All right? Because I brought this up. I brought up the Woody Scouten letter for Tract A. I've also sent to the HOA messages that my lot, my finished floor elevation, and my lot lines are all out of compliance for elevations. Well, so the mood of this letter is kind of, I don't know what you would call it, offensive to the people in Buckeye. But my next video is going to be on Apes. Okay, Apes. Let's start with this letter first, and then I'll explain Apes. This is after we had quite a long conversation where I bled all over this guy. I told them what they did. They lowered my floor, everything. I'm talking to an engineer talking to an engineer. I have engineer credentials and background. I don't spell right. My grammar's terrible. Everything else like that. But I do understand engineering. So I'm going to read this. I'll probably struggle. I don't read that well. And there's a lot of bad spelling. I'm a terrible speller. Okay? Even though I have all these credentials, when I get in a rush, I make mistakes. So we're going to start here. Greetings, Paul. Thank you for the service of investigating a complaint I made to a utility department supervisor. As we discussed on the phone, I have an engineering and real estate background. I am a licensed FAA power plant and airframe technician, along with an FCC certificate. I also have 3 years of college where I was required to take 8 hours of physical science. That course involved in-depth study of gravity, which leads to the subject of design head pressure. If you choose to research your resources, you will see that the finished floor elevation for Lot 316, address 23327 West Twilight Trail, Parcel 12, permit issued to Meritage in January 2004 does not match the adopted community master plan finished floor elevation. Buckeye was a town at the time. The indiscretion intentionally occurred. Intentionally occurred. Town designation to me means cronyism, nepotism, fraternity, family, and a general dislike or misunderstanding of new people adding to the town. For whatever reason of the list above, or some other human factor reason, my house was permitted to be built 3 inches below code. And the reason I say 3 inches is I had measured the 2 patios, and they were 3 inches apart with my water. And it wasn't until I got the permit. This was just before, right around the time I got the permit. And the permit proved to me it extrapolates. You do the extrapolation, the math, it comes to 2.5 inches. Now to continue. These 2 porch pirates 16 years ago decided to put a forever penalty lien against my house. Does anybody get that? When you lower my house outside of spec by 2.5 inches, that I have non-spec sewer pipes going to the street? Okay? Forever penalty against my house. That's a cloud on the title. It's a forever lien on the house. Now, to start again, in the airline industry, this type of undocumented, undisclosed, local, tribal knowledge is considered the product of apes. The product of apes, or what we called in the Vietnam Air Marine Corps, which I was part of, the 10%. Because this all happened in a small local towny municipality, such malice skim is to be expected. But now, Buckeye is a city. A city Buckeye, as a city, Buckeye should be trying to correct past larcenies whenever discrepancies occur. If you really are as experienced as you say you are, then you will understand the systemic skim for the sake of social engineering by local dishonest towny factions. I consider it a failure of leadership for the city not to recognize the importance of Tract A in Parcel 12 as an emergency ingress and egress to serve the residents, active members of the parcel. By now, if you have done any research or asked any questions to your peers at City Hall, you have probably been made to understand that Tract A in Parcel 12 is a sacred cow. It is a hangover from the last administration's and county golf politics. At present, I am buried in yard work and don't have the time to create a carefully prepared presentation. Thank you for the call, and please come by the house anytime. I have 6 months or more invested in trying to sculpt my yard to drain onto the golf course per the original community master plan. You are a city engineer with 20 plus years of wisdom. Please understand how I felt after 10 years to find out there was a core group of thugs running Meritage that lighted cigars with the dollar bills I was sending them in dues on 3 houses. I have many YouTube videos on the subject of the hillbilly porch piracy that took place. We should talk somewhere where the walls don't have ears. Thanks for the conversation and your email address. I am hoping to have a complete video of my history with the town and the HOA and the golf course. Seward Lasham. I've never heard from him since. He hasn't come back since. And about 2 months after I said this was sent in February, in May is when April, 2 months later is when I started getting bombarded with letters about my backyard. Very vague letters. Vague. You're doing something in your backyard. Until you do it, you need permission. There it is. There's my permission. I showed you a letter in a previous video from Pat Pence Young. This is the problem. They took my property line where I butt up against the golf course, and it's like 3 feet high. The whole length. And then they lowered my finished floor elevation by 2.5 inches. Now, let me talk about the Apes. I often talk about, I spent 19 years working for United Airlines in avionics. I was an R&E, radio and electric. I got hired by America West for the same thing, and America West, the week after I got hired by them, they bought US Air. So I was a US Air for 7 years here in Phoenix. Okay? Now, in one of my previous videos, I told you the definition of a producer in the poker games in Vegas. What a producer is in a night of poker in Vegas. Now I'm going to give you a definition of what an ape is in the aircraft industry. What we who have spent a lot of years fixing airplanes, and we all start out stupid. Every one of us start out stupid. And management loves stupid mechanics. They do. And the longer you're a mechanic, the more and more and more management gets to where you're always butting heads with them because management wants to move the product. They don't have a license. Your managers don't have licenses that they can lose. A licensed mechanic does. And a manager who doesn't have a license to lose, if he can get a young mechanic to do just what he wants him to do. And everybody else starts out young. You get into an airline, you think, boy, I've made it. I've been to school. I know everything. I've got my license now. You don't have anything. You got a license to learn. And one thing you learn is to be very, very, very specific and what you read, what you put on paper, and what you sign for. Okay? And it's a very complicated system that keeps these planes in the air. There has to be a signature for every task that's done on the plane. Any task that's done critically on the plane, that's a critical maintenance item, that's been written up as a discrepancy, and the plane, because of that discrepancy, for maybe a day or two or a week, will fly around in a degraded mode. A degraded mode. Okay? All airplanes. If an airplane's been flying all day, it's made maybe 3 or 4 takeoffs and landings where it's been at the gate for an hour and a half or 2 hours between that. It takes off at 8 in the morning. It doesn't get back until 8 or 9 or 10 at night. By the time it gets back, it's got discrepancies that are deferred. Some of them are operational issues. Okay? And it's very specific. When there's a write-up against a system, it's very specific. It tells you what chapter to go to. Is it in hydraulics? Is it in pneumatic? Is it in emergency equipment? Is it in electrical equipment? Is it in doors? Is it in landing gear? Is it in the fuselage, the cabin? Where is it? And it has to be very, very specific. Now, if everybody is honest, the system has a chance of working. It's hard enough everybody being honest to keep all these planes in the air and keep track of all the maintenance. But what we consider apes as seasoned airplane mechanics, the further and further and further you get into your career as a mechanic, you start, here'd be a typical brand new mechanic, replace the part. Well, he puts on the thing, R&R part checks good. The maintenance manager loves that. R&R checks good. Somebody with 30 years of experience, they go, removed, replaced, yada, yada, yada part, per, maintenance manual, yada, 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 performed, test, repaired per wiring diagram, yada, 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 replace part per IPC reference, yada, yada, yada. You write a book, and it's called Cover Your Ass. And when people start doing it, management starts squirming because they can't push people to sign off something that isn't right. And where the bugs, the gremlins come into the system is when we get what we call apes. When the apes don't go and read the maintenance manual. When the apes don't read the wiring diagram. When the apes, when you get them a mod to do, a 3-day mod to do, they start taking shortcuts. Or the apes, after somebody certifies the auto land system on any wide body airplane, an airplane that holds 300 people, it's got 3 FMG computers, flight management computers. It's got everything in it. Those are the heart, the brains of the whole airplane. The flight management computer, and there's 3 of them. Anytime one is taken out of its location for any reason, it's unseated from its location and reinstalled. A complete auto land test. 45 minutes of test has to be done once that thing is removed and replaced. Now what was happening and what happens daily, and I saw it daily, and this is the reason I got out of the aircraft maintenance business as soon as I could retire, is because they got the Apes. Here's a typical situation. They had a problem with something in the navigation, and couple nights before, so it's got a fresh certification on it. Say me or another one of very few people will have the certification to test and recertify an Autoland. I do an Autoland on it on a Thursday night. Fresh. And I certify everything. I have to call up Pittsburgh. And the reason you're calling up Pittsburgh to get a controller to let you sign it off and release the plane is you talk with him. He more or less talks to you to make sure that you're not around to bend that night. You're having a good night. You talk. You're adult. You're logic. It's routine. Yeah, okay, I've done the test per this. And when you sign it off, you write a book to cover your ass. Now, where the gremlins and the apes, these are apes. These are apes in the airline business. They're the 10%, like I mentioned as this. I was in the Marine Corps from 68 to 72. I was in the Air Wing. We called it the 10%. But we call them in the airplane industry, by the time I retired, we classified anybody that did anything that was undocumented. Undocumented. Unrecorded. There's no history. When I restore that airplane to a status where it can auto-land itself, that's in history. They go on the computer and they go, on this date at this time, this mechanic did all this, and it's all there in the computer. It's all disclosed. Where the apes come in is where an ape, now, the next morning, this airplane makes a flight to Boston. And Boston is famous for turning airplanes fast. We don't do maintenance in Boston. It flies in, it flies out. Okay, it's only here for sometimes not more than an hour. We don't have time to do maintenance. Okay? They get a light going across country. Either the flight crew's inexperienced. Maybe somebody left the circuit breaker out on one of the panels. Somebody was doing another test on a system. They might have left the breaker out. Undocumented. Well, what happens is whenever it gets to this next station, the fault tree says for this problem that it's an FMC. The brains of the system. So what happens is at this station, a guy runs up into the center compartment and the lead tells him, go pull the breakers and switch the boxes. Switch FMGCs and see if the problem follows. So this kid, and especially like a new hire, he's just eager to keep the management happy. He goes out and he does exactly what the lead tells him. He pulls the box and he switches them. The left one to the right one to the left one. And the guy upstairs says, it didn't follow. Switch them back. And they switch them back. There's no documentation. They don't document what they did because they know if we document what we did and we tell somebody that we switch computers, because those computers were removed from their location and re-put back in, we have to do a complete auto-land test, 45-minute auto-land test. And we better hope we have somebody on our crew who's auto-land certified. Because if he isn't, this thing is going to have to leave here without its Autoland certification. That's why I got out of working on airplanes. I was the guy that was certifying these Autolands, and I would see an overhaul, and I would see other places that somebody thinks nothing of changing these components to see if the problem follows, and then puts them back and doesn't document it. There's no documentation that that system got tampered with in Boston. None. Same thing that happened to this house out here. Now I'm going to tie in the analogy. They say it did the same thing on this house. These two clowns that went downtown and produced that building permit for my house, did it undocumented. They never told me. I had my name on that house a month and a half earlier. I put a down payment and signed the sales agreement on the 7th of December 2003. On the 20th of January 2004, after I gave them $30,000, they hadn't even broke ground yet, and they had $30,000 of my money that they never intended to give back to me. They went downtown and lowered my house without telling me. And these apes out here, that's why I want to tell this story before I address anybody that's in the Buckeye government, anybody that works on the second floor of Buckeye, all the board members on the board, the mayor, everybody else. I consider Buckeye the planet of the apes. The planet of the apes. Why? Because you apes tampered with my sewer pipes. You tampered with my house. You tampered with my lot. You made me the ultimate outfall elevation. You plugged up tract A and made me it. My lot did not drain. I had a surveyor with 35 years experience, a professional like I was. I've got 30 years of working on airplanes at the highest level. Wide bodies, avionics, CAT qualified on everything United and US Air had. All right? And I bought a house on the planet, in the planet of the apes out here. And everybody knows about it. Everybody, the town, everybody in the second floor knows about it. The mayor knows about it. The HOA board knows about it. My neighbors know about it. And I can't get any relief. And I'll tell you why I'm so insistent on telling any new buyer what's wrong with this house. I can't get away from old habits. Old habits like, this is as serious as like going into a cockpit and handing a pilot a logbook, and if he says, is everything okay? And you tell him, yeah, it's fine. But you know in your mind that the fuel indication is bad. You know that his right wing reads 500 pounds high. All the time. Now, if you don't tell him fuel and emergency equipment on an airplane is probably one of the most important things. You can go degraded on so many things. You can go degraded on autopilot. I only got one autopilot. I don't have an autopilot. Good, fly it by hand. You can go degraded so many things throughout the cabin, throughout the airplane, except emergency equipment, and you have to be very, very careful with fuel indications. I would never, ever hand a pilot a logbook and make him think that all his fuel indication is okay. When I know that his right wing is reading 500 pounds high all the time, do you think I'd let him take that airplane without knowing that? We'd write it up, we'd defer it, we'd have a deferral. It'd have an MEL sticker over the fuel gauge. It would say, don't trust this gauge. It would tell you operational, what to do. When we filled the tank, whatever, we'd fill that tank up completely. and say you're starting with a full tank there. It holds maybe 12,000 pounds. You've got 12,000. Even though it reads 12.5, you've only got, we've told. Now, that's the way I feel about handing this house over. It's a pass down to the new person that's going to buy it. And I've been too honest all my life to let a realtor make a buyer think that there was nothing wrong with this house. These realtors out here, they don't want to tell the buyer that the neighborhood's out of compliance. You're buying a neighborhood that doesn't agree with a plat map. We're supposed to have cart path access over, golf cart access over Tract A. Tract A is supposed to drain. Tract A is supposed to be an emergency ingress and egress. Every month I watch one of the local car dealers drive a truck by my house and drive a truck past Tract A and park it on the number 6 long tee for a hole-in-one contest. When I see that truck going both ways, I imagine that could be an emergency vehicle, fire and rescue. But it can't come into the parcel through Tract A because they tampered with it. The Apes, 20 years ago, the Planet of the Apes out here tampered with the emergency equipment. That's one thing. Another thing in airlines is emergency equipment. We have what we call MEL. I'd like to sell this house to a pilot. That's the only person that would understand what I'm trying to tell him. A pilot to understand MEL, minimum equipment list, and operational limitations when something's wrong. I'd like to sell it to somebody that understands that if you're going to be a stoic person, you don't have a lot of friends, it's just you and maybe your dog, that's it. You're going to take the warning that I issue to you. Don't make sure you have strainers. Don't use the garbage disposal. Don't use the dishwasher. Don't throw big parties. Okay? If you live like that, that operational issue won't be an issue to you because you already are accepting with knowledge what's wrong with the airplane or the house. But no realtor will let me do that in Arizona. No realtor I found out here, I've gone through about 10 or a dozen. When they come, they're all excited about maybe getting a listing, and I let them go through the house and take a look at the lake, and they get all excited, and then I go, we have a problem. Oh, really? What's the problem? The house was built wrong. It's permitted wrong. It's got bad sewer pipes. All I see is smoke. Those realtors know that if we put on a listing that the town of Buckeye authorized this thing to be built out of compliance and authorized a retention base and put on your lot without being told, I just want to sell this house to somebody that knows he's buying into the Planet of the Apes. And it's going to be the Planet of the Apes until they open up Tract A for everybody to use. Okay? Right now, everybody in Tract A except the people that live on each side of Tract A, everybody that lives in Parcel 12, all the rest of us that live in Parcel 12, and especially the people that live here year-round, we're like the plantation slaves. The people that live here year-round are like the slaves on the plantation. When the snowbirds come in the season, in the fall, they take over. Everybody get out of our way. And even the HOA plans for them, the golf course plans for them. They set up the tee boxes for them. Okay? The people from the Midwest go, we want that 6 tee box all the way back on the corner. They get it that way the whole season until they leave. And then around April, when people start leaving, they start moving the tee box to where I'm safe again. But thank you for listening. This is going on YouTube. This is the result of me being sued, okay, by the HOA. I just wanted to let you know what started all this. This letter I wrote, this email I sent to Paul Lopez, He got that about 2 months before I started getting letter after letter after letter about my backyard. My backyard that was sabotaged by a bunch of apes 20 years ago. Sabotaged by apes. Thank you very much for listening. This is going right on YouTube. Beware of HOAs. All right? This is where bucolic meets urban. An urban plan and bucolic people. Bucolic people applying an urban plan to a model. An urban model out here in Buckeye. An urban model with urban responsibility. And it gets out here in the planet of the apes. And what do? They start tampering with everything. And they tampered with my house. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.